You are listening to the Enormocast.
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place
sold it
outside
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000 seats.
We really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed playing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Bad weather. Now or later, anytime is good for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And Defiant Bean is now Bonfire Coffee. How did that happen? Don't worry about it. Jeff is still roasting delicious coffee that will delight your taste buds and will make you feel, smell, and seem more sophisticated. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is July 31st, about 8:30 Mountain Standard Time, which means I'm on time for a change, which is cool. On today's show, episode 62, a conversation with boulderer Angie Payne that I recorded up in Lander in the mobile studio in the park up in Lander a couple weeks ago. I sat down for a certain type of interview with Angie, something I had in my head, and I got something completely different, which I thought was really cool. We actually ended up talking about bouldering for an hour in a roundabout way, bouldering, although we went a lot deeper than that. And we managed to never use the term V, not a single time, actually. So if you are interested in Angie's resume, as it were, as a climber, we don't talk too much about it here, but she has been one of the premier boulderers the last decade, certainly one of the best female boulders, posting up grades like V12 and V13, whatever that even means. I have no idea. I don't know. That's what the Google's good for. The Google will tell you all about her resume. We don't talk too much about that. We get into sort of the inner world of somebody who seemed like everything was perfect on the outside, but wasn't all entirely perfect on the inside. I think a lot of folks will identify with some of the struggles that Angie went through, especially some of the women listeners. As I mentioned in the interview, there's a certain type and brand and flavor of overachieving that women know a little bit more about than guys do. We've got our own type, but anybody who has struggled with that or knows somebody who has, this should be pretty interesting for you. I think this one should be called Type A for Angie. Hey there. Before we get to the show, I want to remind you guys that Black Diamond Equipment is one of the main sponsors of the Enormocast. And like the Enormocast, Black Diamond knows that the surefire way to keep climbers happy is to give them free shit, which is why they are now sponsoring the Mountain Project iPhone and Android app. Something you formerly had to pay for is now free thanks to Black Diamond. Download this app, download the cliff you're headed to, and you will have all the information you need at your fingertips. And there you have it. The Mountain Project app for iPhone and Android. Used to cost money, now it's free. Yeah, so I'm sitting at the Lander Climbing Fest 2014 in the mobile studio, which made it to Lander again without any problems so far, other than I ran out of gas up at Cinci yesterday. And sitting here with Angie Payne, who's a climber from Boulder, Colorado, originally from Cincinnati. You live in Boulder now, right?
I do, yeah.
So welcome to the studio. It's a little warm in here. I apologize for that.
Thanks for having me. No, it's okay. It's not humid, so I can handle it.
Yeah, you're a Midwest girl,
I am.
You know what it's like to swim around in humidity. But yeah, I'm excited because a few episodes ago, I had Chris Schulte on. And the sort of joke in that was he was my gateway boulderer. Because I really hadn't, in 60 interviews or 60 episodes, I hadn't really interviewed a boulderer. And, and he, like most climbers and most boulders, corrected me pretty quickly. Like, yeah, but I have climbed on a rope and I do these other things. But, not to pigeonhole anybody, but, we all are known for one thing over another. And you're definitely known for bouldering. So yeah, now we've got the female version of my gateway boulderer. So now I'm going to peer into this other world, or maybe kind of cross over. So, but I just pigeonholed you as a boulderer. But I guess my first question might just be like, what kind of climber are you? I mean, where does that all fit together?
Well, I think it's interesting too that you say people have to, yeah, but I don't just boulder, and I don't have much shame in admitting that I'm a boulderer, and I love bouldering. I did sport climb. Here I go doing what everybody does. I did sport climb when I was younger. Love it. But bouldering, when I found bouldering, I found my climbing. I felt like that was where I really discovered my climbing for myself. And that's still what I do mostly is boulder.
Right.
I have dabbled in other things, kind of pretend sometimes that I have endurance and that I remember how to sport climb, but it shaped my climbing style, sport climbing, but bouldering is still my thing.
So embedded in there, you said when you discovered bouldering. Can we go kind of back to that and talk a little bit about your beginnings?
Yep.
And where and how did you discover climbing and bouldering?
So when I was 11, I started in a climbing gym. I was in the climbing gym generation. That was climbing for me at first.
And that's in Ohio?
In Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, born and raised. Lived there until I was 18. My parents took me. My brother and my dad took me to the climbing gym, and I was just a route climber for 5 years, exclusively route climbing. Mm-hmm. There wasn't really a ton of bouldering in the gym that I started in,
right?
Which was RockQuest in Cincinnati. And then I got to the adolescent phase and felt like I wanted to do something on my own. Mm-hmm. I had been climbing with my dad. He was my climbing partner. We went to the gym twice a week and trained at the gym in my garage, like little home gym. And
so I'm not really clear. How old are you?
I'm 29.
And so this puts us back like
18-ish years, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll do the math here. So we're talking about the 90s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you say there wasn't a lot of bouldering, I can imagine that. I mean, gyms, especially in the Midwest, were kind of in their fledgling years and really focused on sort of route climbing training.
Yeah, there was a bouldering gym in Cincinnati that I ended up going to more once I became a teenager and decided to start bouldering. But the gym RockQuest was really focused on route climbing. It was one of the really nice route climbing gyms in the country, I think, at that time. It was sort of bigger for its, for the market at the time. When I go back now, it doesn't feel as big, obviously.
Sure.
It's how it is when you go back when you're older. But it was a really nice gym.
So was your dad and brother climbers before you, or did you guys all kind of decide this was something you guys were going to do?
My brother, I don't know, he had a friend who had gone and he went, and then he wanted to go back, so my dad took him, and I was jealous. Like, well, why can't I go? And so then they took me the next time. So it was just a fun little activity, and it quickly turned into the thing that we did.
Right.
Yeah. So we did it together for a long time. Me and my older brother, we climbed together, took lessons together for a couple of months. He sort of bailed out because I got better than him. I think he couldn't take it. And then my younger brother got involved.
Right. Okay.
And so the whole family, really. My mom didn't climb much, but my dad was my climbing partner for like 5 years, and I got involved in competitions pretty quickly.
So, I mean, that's kind of like this, I guess, sort of modern tale of everybody discovering climbing just through a climbing gym.
Yep.
And, I mean, do you have any idea, like, when your dad and, decided to take your brother and then you, like, where... I mean, was he driving by? Did he read about it somewhere? Do you have any idea, like, what the impetus was?
I really don't know. I know that it was, my brother's friend who...
I mean, I'm kind of jealous. Like,
yeah,
I wish my dad had been like...
It's so weird when I look back because we weren't really involved in the outdoor world at all in Cincinnati. And my family particularly wasn't... We were... we went camping. Mm-hmm. That was once a year, my dad took us on a camping trip with his friends and their kids. Mm-hmm. And I loved playing in the woods, and that was the outdoors for me. But climbing was never involved in that. It was just climbing was what I did in the gym.
Sure.
I did go to the Red River Gorge. I started going there more once I had climbed a little bit and got on a youth team, and we went down there, and then, that became more regular. But climbing for me in the beginning was climbing on plastic in the gym.
Right. And, that's another sort of world that I like to kind of peer into, you know. And I talked about this last time. Like, obviously, for me, bouldering, one of the reasons I ended up not talking to a lot of boulders is because I'm not very good at it, and it's not really my thing. But I then realized, well, that's a perfect reason to talk to people about it. And, hopefully get me excited about it. Talking to Chris got me more excited about it. But also gym climbing, I say this on the show a lot, but, I existed in a pre-gym era to a certain extent when I first started climbing. And I came from the Midwest as well. I was Chicago, although I did live in Loveland, Ohio, outside of Cincinnati for a few years of my life as well. But, just kind of that path towards climbing is really interesting to me because I think of it as such an outdoor activity. It's integrated in those two things, but then realizing obviously it's like a sport like any other, and kids get into it for all sorts of different reasons. And what I kind of was thinking about though too is how quickly and how important did competition play into it for you? It
was very important. I just read a thing that I had written about my climbing when I was young, and it said when I started competing, I'd only been climbing for 11 months. So the first competition I did was in my first year of climbing, and I did well. It was I was in the young girls category. There maybe were 2 other girls there. It was a very small local competition, but it was the first time that I really felt like I excelled at something, and the competition sort of validated that, I think. And I grew up in a very structured Midwestern family. There's a certain pattern in the Midwest, it seems, about how you go about things and what success is and what you need to do. At least in my family it was. I was raised with this idea of, like, if you're good at something, then you do this to show that you're good at it and to have something to work towards. And, you do well in a competition, and that's success. And so I fell into that. And a lot of my friends were involved in organized sports.
Right.
And I sort of wanted my own organized sport. And the competitions really provided that organization and that feeling of, okay, this is something that I do. And look, it's valid. There's these competitions, and we have this structure around it. And that was climbing for me. And I know that goes, that's so different than some people's experience in climbing, their early experiences especially. But yeah, mine was really focused around competing. And so that's why I think it took me a long time to really find climbing for myself as my own thing.
Right.
That was a process that, it's still really going on. But once I turned 15, I had this competition where I was just done. I just cried and said, "This
15?
Yeah, 15. Yeah.
That was it, like this arc.
I was like, I'm done with this. I cried and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And then I started going to the bouldering gym because I just needed to do something different.
Okay, so the competition climbing was rope climbing, was sport climbing.
Rope climbing, yeah,
okay.
For the first
Route climbing,
4.5 to 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and then competing. There wasn't a junior bouldering series at the time, so that was part of the reason that I really focused on route climbing. But then I was over it, and I needed to change, and I was feeling like I wanted to be independent from, everybody else, and feeling rebellious. I wasn't really a rebel, but, a little bit rebellious. And so I started going to the bouldering gym. So, because I could do it by myself. And I didn't want to compete, and I didn't want to do, what I had been doing. Then I got involved in the PCA competitions.
Okay.
And that was a blast because it was so different from the youth competitions
in what
for
way?
Me. Well, I was young. I was still 15, and there were, the adults were competing in these things. And so it was this really cool, very intriguing world of these crazy adults, competing, and these crazy people throwing on these competitions, putting on these competitions and throwing all this money into it. And it was just a scene that was really exciting for me as a 15-year-old. I mean, it was the coolest thing out, it was like, this is what all the That's what the cool kids are doing.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I guess it just kind of, it feels more big time and
It did,
and
yeah.
maybe less, I don't know, when you have young kids and parents there and sort of hovering and whatnot, I have friends who, just coach like little soccer teams and stuff, and they just, all they
it's like
talk
that.
about is the parents, like
Right.
how horrible it is
Right.
to have them around
Right.
and stuff.
So yeah, the PCA was really, it's so far away from all of that and that world that I had been in for 4 years.
Right.
That it was really intriguing. And it was so fun because I didn't expect anything of myself. It was
Right.
sort of that first experience of like going back to the beginning. And after I had built up all this pressure for these youth comps and put all these expectations on myself, then I could just run off to PCA comp and suddenly it was fun again. And that it was still competing, but it was different. It was so much different, and it was a huge part of my early bouldering.
So you're only 15 or 16 starting these comps.
Yeah.
And then are these, having you travel more and go to other places and meet different people, or, was there a difference, or were you doing that with the other comps
I
as
was
well?
doing that with the youth comps. I mean, I was traveling, but it was a little different with the PCA. I would go out to the trade show back when the trade show was exciting for me. I was like, I'm going to this trade show in Salt Lake City, and my parents didn't come with me.
You weren't all jaded about it.
Yeah, I wasn't all like, I have to go to the trade show
everybody else,
again.
yeah.
I was
have
like,
to go.
it was really exciting back then.
Yeah,
It was
totally.
like, there's all this stuff going on, and there's this competition, and Lisa Rands is going to be there, and Chris Sharma, and Nels, and all these really strong people that I looked up to, and the crowd's going to be there, and they're going to pack in, and they're going to scream, and it's going to be crazy. And for me, that was a totally different world, and it provided a certain independence. I mean, I wasn't independent. I still traveled with my coach figure person. She was an adult that, my parents wouldn't just send me out there. I wasn't at that point
you're only
yet,
16 years old or
but
17.
I was,
yeah.
it felt like I was doing my own thing.
Sure.
And I loved that. And then, it was...
I mean, the independent thing, whether your coach, wasn't your dad or anything, right?
Right. No,
yeah,
it was.
so,
It was somebody else.
I mean, a lot of times just leaving your parents
Yep.
for the first time for an extended period
Yeah.
is kind of what that's about,
Yep, totally.
And the relationship with your coach, obviously an authority figure, but not the same as a relationship
Right, more
with
of
your
a
parent.
peer. It felt like more of a peer-to-peer thing, and we're going out there together, and
Well,
she
I can
would
imagine
compete
that's
too.
like
So it was
super intoxicating.
Yeah,
like,
it
just
was-
to be,
Yeah.
for a 16, 17-year-old.
It was really cool, and that really drove my love for bouldering more, I think, because it was exciting and it was something different. And I wasn't really that good at it when I started. I was pretty horrible, but then I went to, I kept doing it and did okay in some of the PCAs, which kind of kept me going back, and just that it was intriguing and it was exciting, and and then I was back into the competitions again. So I didn't really take any time away,
Right.
but
You changed sort of your
I just
focus,
changed
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, I like too this idea that you, as a relatively inexperienced person in this particular competition scene, I think it's really interesting how within climbing you can go and hang out with, if not even compete directly with, some of the best people in the sport. It would be like if some amateur high school baseball player could go play against the Yankees, like
Totally.
that can't happen anywhere else. But in
Exactly.
climbing, it can happen.
Yep.
The best of the sport aren't so far away from you that you can't sidle up
Right.
next to them and say hello and be like, oh yeah, that's totally cool. Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, again, I'm peering into this world that I didn't know as a kid, but it's so obvious to me to what was incredibly exciting and cool about all those things. Because if I was 17 and someone was like, "You're gonna go compete in front of these people in the
Right.
in the city you've never even been to, and it's gonna
Yeah.
be awesome," like that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it really was. It was just exciting, and I just had so much fun at those things, and I kind of felt like I was in my own world too, because then I'd go back to school. Nobody at my school climbed. It was like these two completely different worlds. It was the one thing that I really felt like I was different. Mm-hmm. And I liked that. And it's not like that. I mean, climbing is so much more common now, but in Cincinnati in the 90s, if you saw another climber, you stopped and talked to them.
Sure.
You know, it was a big deal there was this very small community and just not a lot of us. It felt really special, actually, to be part of it.
I think the people who are attracted to climbing, you know, that's always been a draw of it, is this sort of feeling of at least being in this sort of small, special kind of tribe. Because, you know, and you're in Cincinnati, but I used to live in Estes Park and knew, like, Tommy Caldwell when he was a little kid and worked with his dad. And it was the same for him. And here's this town that's, like, got a huge history of climbing. And I don't think he had a ton of, like, friends in high school that he was, you know, going to the cliffs with. I mean, high school kids do different things. Like,
yeah. I mean, I had, like, one friend that climbed with me. My best friend climbed, and he would come down and actually climb in the gym in our garage, but all my other friends would come and just do wrestling moves on the mats underneath, you know.
Sure.
Nobody was really that interested, and it's been really funny over the past 10 years when I go back home to visit and go into the climbing gym. It was very consistent for like 4 years. I'd see somebody new from high school in the climbing gym each time. And they're like, oh my gosh, I got into climbing. It's so cool. I remember you climbed in high school. And I wish I would have gotten into it earlier, you know? It was like, well, I tried to kind of tell people it was cool, but it was just such a different world, and it wasn't easily accessible in Cincinnati. You know?
Right. And again, like, thinking about, you know, as I talk to all these climbers and have been doing it myself for so long, like, you know, a lot of times kids don't want to be different. Like, that's actually a big detriment. But I feel like a lot of the people who are attracted to climbing were people who, you know, were that other end of the spectrum that wanted to find something special and didn't necessarily want to fit in per se, or wanted to have at least one aspect of their life that they went to and, like, was kind of their secret world almost, you know?
Yeah, and that's how it was. And I had a really, it's funny because a lot of, you know, there are definitely people who got into climbing because they were rebellious and they were crazy and they wanted to do something that was extreme. And it wasn't really that for me, because I was pretty much like the most straight-laced teenager, like typical overachieving suburban kid, you know. I everything in my life was so, I felt that it had to be perfect, and it was sort of my one way of feeling like I'm going to do something different, and I'm scared to do something different, but this is something that lets me be different in a relatively organized way, if that makes sense. And that's what the competitions did too. It was like this, it legitimized this thing that I was doing that was actually pretty drastically different than everybody else that I knew. But then I would go back to my school world and be the perfect little like, you know, blonde, bubbly, involved in everything, overachieving, straight A student. And it was really two very different worlds. And I liked that because I was able to escape that sort of bubble of feeling like I had to be this Midwestern, just to fit this Midwestern model.
Sure. And so you were a good student, and
I was, straight A. Yeah, I was very serious about getting good grades, and didn't really sleep much in high school, looking back on it, because I was trying to climb and sing in an a cappella group and be involved in everything at school and have a social circle that was huge and get straight A's. So it was I had a lot going on, and I tried really, really hard to. I really just felt like I had to fit this mold, and that was hard. But climbing was my escape from that.
Right. I was going to ask that. Like, is this like ended up being some sort of pressure valve to get out, like, get rid of some of the pressure elsewhere?
The biggest way, yes. I mean, I'm doing my whole presentation on Saturday night is basically about that.
Okay.
About breaking away from that and all those expectations that I put on myself and that I felt were put on me, and without climbing, I don't think I would have ever escaped that.
Right.
I'm still trying to escape that.
You're
I
still
don't think
trying
it's
to be a slacker.
I don't think it's something that is easy to. I mean, God, when you're raised that way, it's like I was talking to Chris Hampton about this morning, and you know he's Midwesterner, kind of understands that, and a lot of people do. It's not just a Midwestern thing,
Sure.
but you know, this is very. I think of it as so typically Midwestern that it's just so hard to escape. When you've been raised that way for so long, you have to like reprogram your brain to think a different way and realize. But that's why climbing has been. It's saved me from myself really, and from really trying to fit into that mold that I don't feel that I really fit into. So I was always forcing it, and climbing is the one thing that has helped me to really see that I don't have to do it that way.
Did you ever blow up? Did you ever break down?
Yeah, all the time. Just not in front of anybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would have like, I remember I would get so stressed out, and I'd have breakdowns, you know, all the time, late at night, usually when I was trying to finish a homework assignment or something. And I was actually involved in this group at school called it was called Stress Group. I'm not kidding. It's like ridiculous that it existed. It's probably a good thing it did, but it was for all these kids who were doing what I was doing. Too many things, trying to do them all perfectly, but at the same time wanting to fight that and knowing that wasn't exactly what we wanted to be. So we all got together. The school counselor organized it. I guess she saw that there were all these poor like 15 and 16-year-olds out there like beating their heads against the wall trying to be perfect and doing too much, and she got us all together in this stress group, and we would go, and it was actually really, really cool. I was looking back, it had an impact on my high school career for sure, and we would just sit down and we just all talk about like what we were stressed about. I mean, it's just a classic like, you know, group session, but
group
it
therapy.
gave us all a sort of an avenue to question the model that we were being raised in. Not question it too much, but like begin to question it, you know? And I look back to the people that were in that group and I just think, yeah, those are some of the people that ended up doing something. They did do different things, you know? In the end, we were all trying to escape something. We just didn't know exactly what, and we didn't know how.
Right.
And I don't mean to bash I love the Midwest,
Sure.
and I would not have it any other way. Being raised there is one of the most important pieces of me, for sure.
Well, I think it's just the frame
The
you're
frame
looking through
is-
because,
yeah.
you know, there's kids in Dallas, Texas that you know, I guess that's sort of the Midwest. I don't know, but they have the same
Right.
problem. There's kids
Sure,
in
it's
school
just
in
a-
LA
yeah.
that have the same problem.
Yeah, definitely.
But coming from Chicago, and I was not that person.
Right.
But I was friends with those people
Yeah.
because I was the kid who you know, the teachers kept saying like, you really should be in this other higher class, or I would be in those classes, but I would, you know, be bringing up the rear because I wouldn't do my
Right.
homework and stuff.
Right.
But I was like smart alecky enough to like get by
Yeah.
on charm. But then I ended up being friends, and I was going to ask you about this stress group, although this is far afield from what we started with. But what was the ratio of girl to guy in there?
There were definitely more girls, but there were a couple of guys.
Okay.
There were like probably like 3 guys and 6 or 7 girls, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is because I was also a high school teacher for 5
Yeah.
years, and thinking back to then, like those people that they're in all schools.
Sure.
And,
Exactly.
And and most of the girls I knew were the ones that were just like wound up the tightest.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. It's probably, you know, partially just the way they're built, but and maybe there's like this sort of modern expectation on women that's a little different than boys. And as a high school teacher, it was the same way. When I asked you about, you know, did you ever just like fully break down? Like, you know, I had students that happened to, like on some serious levels,
Sure.
you know, and it was, again, mostly girls with these huge expectations on them or put on themselves, you know. So my question is, and we're afield here, but, you know, how aware were your parents of this like struggle that you were dealing with?
I think they probably knew, but I'm not really sure. I think my mom, she acknowledged it more as like she would check in, make sure I wasn't too stressed out, and really try to help me with like my stress level. But I think I was pretty good at looking like it was all
smile on your face.
It was all okay.
Yeah.
Everything was good, and it was like there were so many good things about growing up, and I loved high school in general. I had a ton of friends. I was really social. I was involved in a lot of things, and I liked a lot of the things I was involved in, and there were so many good things about it, but it's just turned into sort of looking back at it is really interesting because I just realized like how long it's taken me to break away from that, and still trying, but still love some parts of it that I do want to hold on to.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the end, it serves you, like,
yes,
being motivated and like getting
being
things done.
super type A,
right.
It's not always bad.
There's certainly a service in it,
right?
So I'm going to bring this back to climbing. A couple of things of what you said interests me a great deal because you mentioned when you were in the youth climbing competitions and you had the final one where you're like, I'm done with this. You said something about wanting to, or that you found bouldering was something that you could do for yourself. And that's the kind of interesting thing I see with youth climbers or youth anything really is that, they talk about sort of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. And personally, like high school sports or high school activities, a lot of it is extrinsic. You've got parents that are sort of, you've got a coach. You've got this structure that you talked about. A competition structure is an extrinsic motivation, to place higher and to be. And climbers, all of them need to switch over like you did and start to move into this like, well, do I do this because I love it? And, when I hear about, or someone's like, yeah, this like 13-year-old climbed 514 or 5 billion, whatever. I'm like, that's really cool. But in my mind, I'm like, well, talk to me when they're 25.
Yep, exactly.
Because, 1 in 50 is gonna climb after that competition stuff breaks down, or all that, when they're 25 and they climb 514 and only their friends care.
Yep.
And not
totally.
The whole world doesn't go, you're 12 and you climb 514. Like, so going back to your situation, you what happened after high school? What did you decide to do when you turned 18 and it was time to, you must have had good grades and probably offers here and there around the country. And so what did that look like as you've moved into like out of that structured situation? Yeah.
So I began, I did go through that process of sort of rediscovering climbing for myself a little bit through starting to boulder, but it was still, I was still competing and still doing that. And there was still this like, okay, I'm climbing now, but what am I going to do really? Really, what am I going to do? That was what I always thought. Well, okay, what am I going to do? Because I'm not going to climb forever. I really did still think that in high school. Like in my junior year, and then it came time to look at schools, and I had been out to Boulder for some climbing camps, and I just knew there was just something inside of me that knew I really wanted to break away, and college was the opportunity for me to make that decision to do something really different. And I remember vividly the night that I decided where I was going to go to school, and I intentionally, looking back, it was very intentional, didn't apply to a lot of schools. I applied to one in Ohio, and I applied to the University of Colorado, and that was it. And all of my friends were applying to millions of schools, and I had great grades, and I had a good ACT score and SAT score and whatever you need, and I was involved in this and that. And I just remember, I think I was really setting myself up for that opportunity to, it wasn't very, I didn't think about it in that way at the time, but looking back, I was really setting myself up to make that big decision to break away. And I just remember the night when I decided, I was talking to one of my friends, and I had been accepted to both of the schools, one in Ohio and one in Colorado. And I was the kid who like couldn't even go away to summer camp without being homesick. It was, I hated leaving home. I just hated it. And it made me anxious, and it was so hard. And then there was a night, and I was on the phone, and I was standing in the middle of my bedroom and talking to a really good friend, climber, at the time. And it just clicked. And I knew I was going to Colorado, and that was it. I made up my mind, and that was the real turning point for me. It was like, I'm going to Colorado for school, but I'm going to Colorado because of climbing, and this is going to be like my big escape, so to speak, you know? It wasn't nearly as simple as that, but that really led me towards rediscovering climbing as something that I really love, but it still took a while.
Right.
Because even once I got to Colorado, I was doing the competitions. I was doing well in the competitions. I won some national competitions that year, and I was still pretty miserable. Like, I was homesick. It was like a huge change. Exactly. You don't run away from yourself. So yeah, it took a long time, and it actually took a serious like injury for me to really get to that point where I felt like I rediscovered climbing and I wanted to be climbing. And it was like 100% for me. And I do look at these kids. I do the same thing you're saying. It's like, you know that they have to go through, everybody goes through that process, especially if you start that young, of like reassessing why the hell am I doing this? Like, what am I doing? What is this? And for me, that didn't really happen until I had been in Colorado for like a while. It was a slow process, but then the being injured and having to come back was like the real turning point of now I'm doing this because I want to be doing this.
Well, I really, you know, again, like this is interesting to me because my path to Colorado actually was somewhat similar in that I was in Chicago or Libertyville, Illinois, anyway, suburb, not unlike where you
Suburbs,
were.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm picturing your high school like really close to what my high school was like, you know, upper middle class, like public school, but still like really
nice,
competitive.
Competitive.
But I was the rebel. I was the rebel kid,
right.
And I wanted to leave for maybe different reasons, but I did the same thing in terms of like, well, I'm going to this Colorado place because that's where there's mountains and things like that. I mean, it's in the songs, and you know,
there's songs about it.
And if you look at the map, it gets all green and bumpy
right,
over there.
It's cool
you know?
over there.
So I really can like identify with that, but I also like this fact that on the I don't like it, but it's interesting to me. That's a better way to put it. This exterior that probably seemed so perfect, like she gets great grades, she gets to choose wherever she wants to go, and like just so successful and has all these friends, and yet here's this inner world that like, you know, I mean, as an adult I understand it, and as a teacher I understood it, but I didn't necessarily see it going on because we're also like, you know, self-centered when we're that age anyway. But I think it's really fascinating to realize that these kids around me that seem perfect were struggling as well. And I know that now because, like I said, I've seen them blow up. I've seen them crack open. But I can imagine that when you got to college, you started overachieving classes and just went right back into
for
boom,
sure.
boom,
It
boom.
was like nothing really changed that much, and I was actually really depressed when I moved because it was such a I kind of got there and I had this like really like this is what I'm doing, and it was one of those moments in my life and I was like, oh yeah, I got this is like big change. I cut all my hair off, like for some reason that was like this symbolic, you know, like the classic cut my hair off. Yeah, you guys like my blonde hair, whatever. I'm cutting it off, leaving it. So I cut all my hair off, and that was some, you know, big thing for me because it was just like, I'm breaking away from this. I'm doing it. And then I remember getting out there and I had to go do some things, and I had to like open a bank account and do all these like little, you know, adult things the first couple of weeks I was in Colorado, and I was driving to do all this stuff, and I just had like one of those horrible breakdowns where I was like, what the fuck am I doing? This is crazy. I can't do this. I just melted, and it was like the moment of it all catching up and like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, right. Oh, what did I do? What did I do? So I like went back into that world of overachieving, like, okay, winning the comps, and I wasn't happy. I mean, I remember sitting outside of my dorm room and just on the phone with my mom, just crying. I just won like 2 of the nationals that year, and I said, I won, and I'm not happy. And now all I can do, like, if I don't win, then it's just downhill. Like the only thing I can do to maintain is to keep winning. And it was just all the same stuff. It was all still there. It didn't go away. I mean, and I guess the rational part of me knew that it wouldn't go away just because I moved.
Right.
But yeah, it was. It got worse before it got better, for sure.
So what kind of? So you arrive in Boulder. This is what, like late 90s?
2003.
2003. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not doing all the math that well, but
But yeah, that was when.
Yeah. So I mean, you arrived into an extraordinarily established climbing. I mean,
Yeah.
like multi-generational climbing community. What was that like to arrive? I mean, were you welcomed into that community? Did you have peers right away? Did you, what was that like as well?
It was really intimidating.
And did it fulfill expectations or not?
Yeah, it was. So I knew a couple people. Like, I knew Emily Harrington. She was one of my friends at the time already because I knew her through the youth circuit, and that was actually a comfort. Like, okay, at least I know somebody there. Like, I know Emily. She's my friend, and we can hang out. And but it was really intimidating. Aside from a few people, I felt very out of place, and the community was so much bigger than what I was used to. It was really overwhelming. I was used to going into the gym and having my 5 buddies that I climbed with, like the crew that shows up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right. And we all climb together. It's like with the guys usually, because there weren't a ton of women in the gym climbing where I grew up. And it's like going to Boulder was a totally different world. And I was really intimidated. And I kind of kept to myself for the most part. I remember I would spend all the time in the gym. I was in the gym all the time. I was there on Friday nights, and people would make fun, people would laugh. Oh, Friday night, big Friday night. It's like first year of college, and here you are at the climbing gym. I didn't know what else to do. I was so out of my element that climbing was the one thing that was like familiar. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And yeah, I just kept doing it. And I mean, slowly I did make friends, but like I said, I was bummed. I was bummed that I'd left. I was like, what did I do? I left home. There were moments when I thought maybe I'd move back. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of trouble with, like, I was climbing a ton. I lost a bunch of weight, struggled with that. It was the classic, leaving home and feeling totally lost. Where am I? Mm-hmm. Where I slowly, like, met friends, and my roommate was really awesome. So I hung out with her a lot. And that was like the saving grace of that year probably was that I had a really good friend in my roommate.
Sure.
So
I mean,
it was helpful.
That honestly could have been the thing that broke it too. Yeah. Like if they were heinous,
Yeah.
Like,
it really could have been. There's a lot of things that could have like pushed it in the other direction for sure. I don't know if this is like a good thing or the right way, like the way it should be, but I also think it was helpful that I was strong. I know that sounds weird, but like in the community, I felt like I was intimidated by the size of the community, but I felt like being strong helped me to feel comfortable. Not that it should be that way, but that was my one thing that was like, okay, here I am, and I'm going to try really hard, and I'm a good climber, and I can do this, and I can fit in here, and I can do, because I have climbing, I'm going to fit in. And I was very uninvolved in the school world. So climbing was it. And I do think that helped, that I wish it wasn't that way, but I do think it helped.
Well, I mean, I think being good at something, whether, if you were to have arrived on a music scholarship and it turned out that you were one of the good violinists or whatever, that's a comfort.
It was.
I mean, it's a place to go.
Comfort,
and
yeah.
I think, to sort of reflect on it negatively, that sort of falls into that trap of like, our inner person is worth more than our outer person. That seems like, but that just seems completely normal. And to be honest with you, I mean, the Boulder scene or any huge climbing scene like that, like, that is part of the interaction of, who's good and who's not as good and who's a beginner and who's coming up. So that's just natural to me,
Yeah.
And I can imagine that, there was at least a sort of accepting nod from some of the people around, like, oh, she knows what she's doing, like,
Yeah.
And you're right. I guess it is unfortunate that everyone can't just welcome everyone into the fold, but the truth is, the other violinists don't want to play with a crappy violinist. It makes them sound worse. It's like,
yeah. So I mean, it was that really helped me get through the first year.
Was there any sort of, like, you mentioned sort of keeping to yourself, and
Yeah.
and maybe being a little bit closed up. Was there like a backlash against that in terms of being able to make friends or be accepted into the climbing community?
It's hard to say because I was not on the outside of it, you know? So
right.
I'm not sure if people are like, oh, she's so quiet. Who's that girl? Like, what? I wasn't that quiet,
Right,
but
right.
I was pretty quiet. I was
Right.
pretty uncomfortable with being there. And,
Yeah, well, the reason I ask is,
where
I mean,
I
I like
was,
to
yeah.
think of climbing as being this all-accepting thing because, you know, traditionally it's had all these weirdos in it.
Right.
But I think that applies to sort of my vision of the past
Yeah.
in a way. And, you know, walking into a gym and a place where there's competitions, it's like automatic to go pecking order. And
Yep.
and as a high school teacher, you know, you guys were not in high school anymore, but things don't change that much. You
right.
know?
right.
And I
Things
can
don't just suddenly change
yeah,
between
and
your senior
I just
year
can
and your...
see like the quiet kid, boy or girl.
Yeah.
You know, some people, she's a bitch.
Right.
And it's like, it turns out, no, she's just terribly shy.
Yeah.
You know, or he, you know, that kid's a loser, but
Right.
no, he's just got his own thing going on, you
Yeah.
know, so I was just curious, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I started to, like, come out of my shell a little bit, and I wasn't totally shy, but I was relatively, I was kept to myself pretty much that year, I would
Okay.
say. And, yeah, I could, just because it was weird, and I don't think people knew the difference, because in high school I was really outgoing. I was the drifter, you know, the friends with all the crowds, kind of that, like, I wasn't super popular, but I was friends with the popular kids. I wasn't super dorky, but I was friends with the dorky kids. I was friends with the drama kids, and friends with I was kind of like that all in-between person.
Sure.
And when I came to Colorado, I didn't feel like I was that at all anymore, but nobody knew the difference, because nobody knew me before.
Right.
So, you know, I was like... Okay, I was trying to recreate myself in a way, but I was bummed, man. I was just bummed.
Huh.
I was so bummed that year to be away from home, because all of a sudden it was like I said, it was just lost. Like, wow, what did I do? This is crazy.
So
why am I so, like, everybody else stayed in Cincinnati and here I am, like, trying to do my own thing, but being terrified of it at the same time. So I just went to my comfort zone, like, back into the competitions. Tried to, you know, get my straight A's at school. Yeah, that was my life for first year of college. Didn't drink, didn't do anything. I mean, it was like high school continued.
Yeah.
minus the like great social life,
Minus
you
the
know.
good parts.
Kind of, yes. But then I discovered one of the things that really saved me was starting to climb outside.
Okay, yeah, good, because that was
Yep.
going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Not just climbing outside, but, you know, you're still in Boulder to this day.
Yep, I am.
And so something happened.
Something changed.
Yeah, so
It's true.
yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Part of what changed is that, so I was struggling pretty hard and was really, like, lost a lot of weight, like I said. And my parents got really worried. And they said, if you don't change something, you're coming home. And that scared me. I was like, okay, whoa. That sort of woke me up. It's like, no, I want to stay here. I want to stay here. So, like, really uncharacteristic of me, I called up this guy from the climbing gym that I knew, and I'd seen him. He'd worked at the front desk. We were friends. And I said, hey, you want to go to Waco? And I just called him, like, literally at the gym. This is something I would never do. I said, you want to go to Waco? He said, well, yeah, when? I was like,
like,
over
"Who's
Christmas break. Yeah, who's this?
Your name is...
And I was like, yeah, I'm looking for somebody to go with. I thought maybe you'd be going. And he said, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll go. And so we went on this trip together. We ended up dating for 5 years. So, like, that was a big, that wasn't like the thing that changed it, but my parents sort of saying, look, if something doesn't change, you're not healthy. You need to come home. So I was like, nope, I'm not coming home. And went on this climbing trip. Really loved climbing outside in Waco. It's just in heaven. Like, this is awesome. This is so cool. And then after that, really started going outside more in Colorado and kind of discovering, like, this, it's a whole nother world, you know? It's like, I really came to Colorado not knowing what there was. I knew there was a lot of climbing, but I didn't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew there were gyms.
Right.
I climb in the gyms, which is funny for a lot of people to hear, I'm sure, but I really did that. And then I sort of discovered this world, and that kind of got me outside in Colorado, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with being out there in the mountains and going up there every day and climbing, and really started projecting things and I love projecting things. so that whole process started, and that turned a lot of things around for me. And then I got hurt, and that changed things a lot too. That was part of the falling back in love with the sport again when I came back. And
so why? What did that look like? The being hurt, not being able to climb, made you Jones for it, and realize like without it, this is this is something I want to I gotta have in my life.
Yep, it really was. It was. I had never been without climbing since I was 11.
And was it a climbing injury?
Climbing injury. I just fell in the. It was a really rough time. It was so I had been in Colorado for 5 years. Started climbing outside a ton. Was still competing, but was really like getting psyched on being outside too, and doing that a lot. Still in school because I took some time off and traveled for like a semester. So I was going through school really slowly. And ended up having just this fall in the gym that I missed the pad. It was like a silly little, silly thing, and wrecked my ankle. And a week later, broke up with my boyfriend. And it was like one of those, the second rough time. But it sort of forced me to rest, obviously. I had to have surgery eventually. And when I came back, I've never felt so happy to be climbing. That was the moment when it was really clear to me that I needed and wanted to be doing this for me. That was the first time that I felt like this is my thing. I'm climbing entirely because I want to. Yep. Yeah. And so, that was the best thing that ever happened, really, was the injury. It was horrible at the time, obviously. Sure. It always is. It sucks. But when I came back, I had this appreciation for the sport that I just never had before. And I was just so happy to be climbing. I was horribly weak, and I'd been off for 8 months, but it's like, I don't care. I'm climbing, and this is what I want to be doing. So that was a huge, huge turning point in my climbing. So in this period, are you, or not just this period, but previously as well, this 5 years, or were you ever living as a professional climber? I mean, were you ever making a living at it? I know you're, no. You have sponsors and you're sort of reasonably well known, but obviously it's nearly impossible to do that. So I was just in school. I was making a little bit of money from competitions. Sure. But I wasn't making an effort to okay, I'm going to be a sponsored climber now. I was still competing a lot, but I had school and I was getting help from my parents, and I was also working at an animal clinic. So I worked 20 hours a week, was in school, and then climbed. Okay. And made ends meet that way until I was out of school.
I mean, is there such thing as only making money as a professional boulderer?
I don't know.
Maybe Daniel.
I don't do it, so maybe there's Daniel a couple. Woods, but I guess that now I'm trying to do that now because I'm in this weird limbo state and in between, and it's hard. I know there are a few people who do it, but I wasn't doing it at that time. No, I was in school.
So this second hard time, the second way, the broken ankle, the breaking up a long-term relationship, which kind of fits a little bit again, like breaking away even it's more my own thing now, because I think a lot of couples, maybe get together, climbing together, and then one person's more into it, less into it, and sort of drags each other along.
Totally.
So now you're just okay, this is completely my own thing, at least for the moment.
Yep.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2009.
Okay, so pretty recently.
Yeah, 5 years ago.
And so, we're actually we've been going for quite some time here. This is really fascinating. I'm really glad that you're being so personal and opening up about this stuff, because I know there's people out there, like I just said, that we all see as being they've got the perfect setup. But to hear you, talk about this inner world that's just a mess. Yeah. No offense.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be a downer here,
right.
But it's just something I never get to really talk about. Yeah. And I think it's important because, it's just part of it all, and it's really helped. Going through it all has just been part of the whole process.
Right.
I'm glad I did.
So let's talk about your place now, maybe starting 3 years ago, where you're at with climbing at this moment, and, where you think sort of you fit into the community, and maybe, what you're looking at for the future, because here you are, have emerged now climbing is this, obviously you got to have it in your life. And
Yeah.
Is it going to stick around, and what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, it's going to stick around. I'm convinced of that now. So I'm in a niche, I would say, bouldering.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I interrupt you, but thinking about, 2003 or whatever, and this, when you went to Waco about that time.
Yeah.
And, it did really position you, I think, in this resurgence of bouldering.
Yeah.
Because
Definitely.
it's become like almost the biggest part of media.
Yeah.
I think for a bunch of different reasons, but so you kind of were poised, at least in this latest, I mean, that was 10 years ago, but this growing interest in
that's true.
it. So, anyway, so
Yeah,
now we are
so
10
I was.
years later.
Yeah, that's true. And I still am almost exclusively bouldering, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Love going outside, but still do the competitions a lot.
Okay.
I'm one of those people that I'm not ashamed to admit that I love climbing inside and I love climbing outside.
Mm-hmm.
Climbing inside for me can be just as awesome as climbing outside. And I have, in the past couple years, sort of started to explore some other things. I went on a big trip to Greenland a couple years ago, and that was really huge for me, just to see something completely different. And I didn't climb anything big out there, but we kind of tried to go summit this peak.
Who did you go with?
Michael Becky and Ethan Pringle.
Oh, okay.
And Keith Ledzinski was the
Right,
photographer.
right.
Yeah. And that was huge for me, just to see this other,
I remember
other world.
images,
Yeah.
Keith's images.
Gorgeous, gorgeous place. And that really did spark this interest in, well, what else is out there? I mean, it's a classic. Just, wow, this place is amazing. What other amazing places can I go see? And how can climbing be a part of that? So I think that I'm definitely a little bit more interested in being able to be a little more versatile. I'm still totally in love with bouldering. And I just love it. I love being able to go out by myself if I want to. I really love trying to do hard moves and the subtleties of it all and the independence of it. But I am interested in being able to do different things when I go to really cool places.
Right.
So I think that would be the motivating factor to sort of explore more. I mean, I know there's so much more to climbing, obviously. I'm just in love with bouldering.
Well, yeah, and the truth is to be great at any one of them, unless you're, one of those absolutely rare individuals who we all know a couple of.
Yeah.
You really do have to focus. But,
Yep.
Chris mentioned this, Schulte mentioned this, Lynn Hill mentioned this. Like, the fact is that, when you're ready to change, you can just change. It's not so much different.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
really
world
cool.
is full of, these opportunities in climbing.
Yep.
And, if you got your rope out, it's not like, you'd be back to climbing 5'6",
Right,
like,
right. There's
it's gonna
a
figure it
ton
out,
of room, and that is one of the really cool things about climbing. And I know that, if there's a time when I'm a little bit more tired of like, oh, I don't want to be bouldering as much, there's 100 other things I could go do in climbing, and I know a lot of people that would be willing to help me with that, and I feel lucky that that we have that community that's like, okay, cool, you want to try this? Sure, let's go. And yeah, so the trip to Greenland really sparked that. Okay, there's so much more, and I knew that, but I can see how it would be applicable here, Wow, it'd be cool if I could climb that tower because it's gorgeous and I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
I get that. I got that feeling of that when I stood there and looked at it. Okay, yeah, I get it. Like, this is why people climb towers. Okay. Yeah, because that's cool. I could see being on top of that would probably be pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we started this conversation pretty much talking about your dad, brother, bringing you into the gym.
Yeah.
So you're now sort of a, sponsored climber, but you've got other things going on. You're sort of making your life work in Boulder. You didn't have to be recalled to Cincinnati.
That's right. They didn't take me back.
They didn't take you back or force you back. But, just where is your family with like the interest in what you're doing? And, is your dad like happy he started you going down this path?
That's a good question.
Or is he,
it's a really good question.
Without, getting into
I won't go into too many details, but my family has always been really supportive. I have to say, like, I wouldn't be here without my parents. Really, they were supportive of me being in Colorado, and that was huge, just to leave and have their support and their blessing of like, okay, yeah, go do it. But there was always this underlying, like, okay, but what are you going to do after that?
Sure.
What else are you going to do? And it's something that I still struggle with, but there is more. A lot of things have changed recently in my life and my family, and there's this new feeling of genuine support from my parents that wasn't there before, which is really cool. And finally, I had a conversation with my dad recently that it was the first time that he has said, "Why don't you do something with climbing instead of what else are you going to do?"
Right.
And then that has been a huge turning point for me, just because all along I've been getting there in my own brain, well, there's these other options. Why am I so stuck in this one way? And just to hear it, I wish that I didn't feel that that made a huge difference, but it does. It has been really cool to hear my parents sort of coming around to this, oh, look at you. What are you going to do with that kind of thing? And not feeling like, okay, is it out of your system yet?
Right.
They acknowledge now that this is where I am, and this is like what I do, and I love it, and they know that, and they are really supportive of it.
I guess throughout the arc of this, that was on the back of my mind, starting with this idea of, being this kind of on the Midwest path to success.
Yep.
And you getting off of it,
and
I'm
veering off.
My parents are probably like, wow.
Yeah.
But, the truth is on the stage last night here in Lander, I had an ER doc who climbs 514 and has 2 kids. And, so there actually are ways, if you wanted to tap into that type A person that's still living inside of you.
And seeing people,
to do those things,
that's the coolest part about the climbing community. There's everything. You see it all.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever way I mix it, however I end up doing it, I don't know what it's going to look like. And this is the first time that I've been really okay with saying, I don't know what it's going to look like. And I always had to have a plan when I was younger, and up until now, it's like, what's the plan? What's the plan? And this is the first time that I've really stepped back and just said, there will be something else, and I'm going I'm going somewhere, and I don't know what it's going to look like, and I'm okay with that right now, and I just have to sort of figure out the way that I'm going to do it instead of the way that I think I should do it.
Well, that's a great way to end. That's a great place to end the conversation. And I really appreciate you coming in. It's been really fun to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that you felt comfortable to let us all know about that.
Yeah,
that's
one of the more intimate looks at Angie Payne that you'd probably ever see.
All right, that's what I'm here for. So thanks a lot, Angie.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening. I want to thank Angie again for being so open and personal. After we turned the mics off, she expressed surprise even herself at how deep she'd gone. So I think it's helpful to hear that kind of stuff from someone who's so good at something that we admire, that it wasn't necessarily all that easy for. It makes us all feel a little bit more human, I think. And if you see Angie, you're going to want to give her a big hug after that. But don't. At least not without asking. All right? Okay, folks. Remember, if you want to help out the Enormocast, you can go to enormocast.com and click on the Help Out tab. Lots of suggestions there of things to do to help the Enormocast on its path to world domination. I got an email from Belgium last week, a sticker request from Hungary. Been sending them out to Norway, to Sweden, to Finland. That's been pretty awesome. So that's the cool thing about the internet. It goes everywhere, pretty much. Oh, heard from a guy in Israel. And a whole bunch of other places in the past. Korea, crazy places. Even Canada. Yes, folks, our numbers are growing. The community is strong. Hopefully you guys are having a great summer out there. Or if you're on the other side of the world, in the other hemisphere, hope you're having a great winter. Because that's how far this thing goes. And no matter where you are and what you're doing, if it involves a rope and getting high off the ground, it can be dangerous. So do not forget to check your knot.
They're not literally his children. They're the little Lebowski urban achievers, inner city children of promise, but without the necessary means for a higher education. So Mr. Lebowski is committed to sending all of them to college. Excuse me. Thank you.
Far out. Think he's got room for one more?